Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmasrupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we are continuing a discussion on Ramanuja's system of Vedanta called Vishishtadvaita. So now there are very interesting points of difference between Ramanuja's system and Advaita of Shankaracharya. So just a few things I would like to mention. In Advaita Vedanta, in Shankaracharya's system, you will find Shankara emphasizes the idea that the absolute reality, Brahman, is not an object of cognition, not an object of what we normally understand as the word knowledge. So this needs to be very clearly understood. You often find in English translation the absolute knowledge, which is which actually translation of the Sanskrit word jnanam, knowledge of Brahman, and consciousness, and jiva, the unity of jiva, individual soul and the universal soul. And this absolute reality is not an object of cognition. It is not an object of knowledge, because when we use the word knowledge, it implies something that is known, and the process of knowing, and the knower who knows, who comes to know of the objects. So in Sanskrit it's called, jnanam, jnata, jneyam. What is known, and then the process of knowing, knowledge, and also the person who knows, that is jnata. Jnata is the knower, jneyam is the thing that is known, and knowledge is the process of knowing, cognition. So this is a very important thesis in Advaita Vedanta. That's because Advaita tells you that the absolute reality is something that is only experienced and not known, the way we know things, objects of knowledge in this world. I come to know of an object when I see it with my eyes, which means my eyes and mind come together and I cognize an object. That's the process of cognition. Now Vedanta says Atman or Brahman cannot be known like that. So you often you hear the word Anubhavaika Vedya, something that is known only through experience and not through the process of intellectual knowledge or intellectual cognition. So frequently you find it is unknowable. In the sense, it is beyond objectification, it is beyond empirical cognition. Now, this idea will be totally misunderstood in the Ramanuja system. You can see how Indian philosophical ideas, they take different positions. Now, Ramanuja system, some of the philosophers of Ramanuja school will tell you, this means Advaitins say that absolute reality is unknowable. It doesn't say it is unknowable. It is not knowable to the senses and mind. It is not intellectually cognizable. That's the only implication here. So, in contrast to this, Ramanuja, I will tell you that the reality can be known. It can be known. The reality of the world, of matter and finite self, only as objectives of Supreme Being, the reality of Brahman cannot be unknowable. So he says Brahman is knowable. This idea behind. So, and then he, they try to give a different interpretation to certain Vedantic statements like Yato va imani bhudani jayante yena jatani jivandi yaprainda visanjandi tad vijñāsasva tad brahma. Is a statement, it comes in the Taittiriya Upanishad, in the Krishna Yajurveda, where it's a very interesting, intellectually very rewarding experience to contrast. This particular statement comes in the Taittiriya Upanishad, where a boy is approaching his father. And he asks his father, please teach me the knowledge of Brahman. And the father, says, you go and see, sit and think and contemplate and meditate. From where do all these things emerge? What sustains them? And what finally happens to them? What's the point of dissolution of all these things? So, that is Yato va imani bhudani jayante, yena jatani jivandi, yet prayandi abhisambhisandi, tad vijñāsasva, tad Brahma. That you try to understand, and that is Brahman. So Ramanuja will tell you that means Brahman can be known. So vijñāsasva means. So you can try to understand, you meditate on the origin, the point of, the fact that the reality that sustains them, and also the point of dissolution of everything. What's the final cause? What sustains them? And what is the final point of dissolution? That is Brahman. Now, it can be argued in both ways. Here, the implication is that you can know Brahman the way you can know an elephant or the tree, which you can easily know, is a visual object. Or you can know about a car moving the street by hearing. So the sense of hearing and mind come together, and you cognize the presence of a car in the street nearby by hearing the sound. But that's not the implication here. You meditate, and then in your inner being you realize the true nature of Brahman, and you find when you transcend this body consciousness, when you realize the absolute reality that is beyond this body-mind complex, then you find a divine spark within you is the same as the all-pervading divinity, that is the Antaryami Atma within, that is the same as the Brahman from which this world originates. So, this unity of the individual and the universal, dimensions of the same reality, this you realize and you don't just cognize. But now, vijñāsasva, such words can be stretched in any direction. So, Vishishtadvaita tells you that Brahman can be known, it is knowable. But Brahman cannot be known the way we come to know external objects. So, he says that, so it must be understood that the statements describing Brahman as unknowable. That is, it is impossible to know the absolute Brahman in entirety. So what he says, it is true that Brahman in its totality may not be known, but you can certainly understand, you can cognize Brahman. This is the Ramanuja, this is the view of Ramanuja. So, we may not be able to fully understand the reality of Brahman, but we can certainly understand in its incomplete form. So he says this is the import of the scriptures that describe Brahman as going beyond the realm of mind. For example, vacham agocharam, beyond words. Words cannot see them. Yato va imani bhudani jayante, like that. Avangmanasa gocharam, it is beyond the province of mind and words. Such statements are found in many Upanishads, and Ramanuja doesn't accept, in their own language, avedyatum and avachyatum and anirvachaniyatum. That means one is the Brahman cannot be intellectually cognized. Avedyatum. Ramanuja won't agree with that. And again, it is avachyatum. Brahman cannot be explained, cannot be described, cannot be defined. That also is not acceptable to Ramanuja. So we have to remember, I mentioned long ago, I tried to if I try to explain this in the light of Eckhart's own idea of the indescribability, what we call non-definability or the absolute reality. So that's actually is a statement that comes straight from the Bhashyas of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya says, for example, this absolute reality is beyond words. Because if you want to explain anything in words, then it should have one of these conditions. First, there should be something to which it is compared. Or you can explain something in the context of some activity. Let's say, for example, you can say this is like sun. You don't say what is sun, nobody asks. But you can say this, you can get an idea of the effulgence of the sun, the effulgence of light of the sun. So it is like sun, you can say. Or you can say this person is a musician because you are explaining him in the context of something that he does, karma. So dravya karma. He is a gardener, he is a musician, he is a painter, he is a teacher. You are trying to explain somebody or something in the context of some action, karma. Or jati means some generic category. Say it's an animal, you can say. So lion is an animal, elephant is an animal. So the animal that I saw the other day is like an elephant or like a tiger, you can say. So there is some kind of a description because there are certain creatures, some animals, certain species that belong to one category, so jati or guna. Say for example, it like a red flower or blue as the sky. Sky is really no blue color, but still you can normally say it is seen to be blue from a distance. That's all. So you can use some of these jati, guna, sambandha. You can say you can introduce your friend or a stranger. This is your friend. This is your brother, and so on. So some kind of sambandha relationship. So jati, guna, dravya, sambandha, all this karma, all this is called pancha, shabda, pravritti. And what is beyond this verbalization is called pancha, shabda, pravritti, nishedha. This is an important thesis in Vedanta, and surprisingly you find in Meister Eckhart also, which is far beyond the reach, beyond the theological doctrines of both Aquinas and Augustine. I mean, even to define God as God is a limitation. So, words cannot explain this reality which can only be experienced and not explained or described. Now, Ramanuja won't have any of this. He says God has a name, Srinivasa, Narayana, Siman Narayana, and he has some qualities. So we are going to describe this in the Vedartha Sangraha, which is a small book, a very well-known book, the small. In a way, those who cannot study, those who don't have the resources to study Sri Bhashya, can study the Vedartha Sangraha. It's a very introductory work, but very prominent book of Ramanuja. So there Ramanuja is good. We may make some statements from that book and later see Bhashya also. So Ramanuja rejects the idea of avedittum, avachittum and anirvachaneyattum. He rejects the idea that Brahman cannot be explained. It is beyond the five verbalizations. You cannot explain Brahman in terms of something that is well known, like sun or moon, you cannot do. You cannot explain Brahman in terms of some activity, like you explain a musician as a musician, a teacher as a teacher, and you cannot explain Brahman in terms of some action, or you cannot explain him in terms of some relationship, some bantha, jati or generic quality, nothing like that. So these are very, very important. So Vigidam Vedyam Vachyam cha Bhasamanatvad. So here he explains this idea. Therefore, it is impossible to say that Brahman is avachyam and avedyam. Because bhasamanatvad, because it is present everywhere, it is self-effulgent everywhere. And of course, he gives some other descriptions from the Nayayika's perspective. So that's a bit more dialectical, maybe that we discuss later. So, and again, Ramanuja says something else. There is no distinction between Saguna and Nirguna Brahman. So, in a way, this may appear to be very similar to Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, but it is totally different. Now, Sri Ramakrishna says the absolute reality can be personal and also impersonal. What it means is, at one level, this absolute reality may appear to be personal, but you cannot say this is the only way to explain. This is a limitation. So the absolute reality is actually impersonal in the sense that you cannot really put a limit to the absolute reality. But in Ramanuja's system, his idea of Brahman is a saguna, sakara, savisesha. And of course, there are some other statements here. Surupa nirupana artha shabda ki karmamukhena surupamabi pradipadayitum tatahi ki sutrakaraka. So, in some of the statements in the Vedanta Sangraha, you can find such ideas. So, I will try to explain this in the light of this great book, Vedanta Sangraha itself. And where Ramanuja actually goes to, he discusses another very well-known subject in Vedanta, especially when he describes the well-known, what you call, Mahavakya, especially Tattwamasi, which is one of the most important statements in the Chandogya Upanishad. And I think I already discussed this very elaborately in the previous sessions while describing Advaita. In the Chandogya Upanishad, in the 6th chapter, there is an interesting dialogue between a father, Uddalaka, and his son, Swetaketu. At one point, the whole chapter has got 16 khandas, 16 sections. And the most important teaching in this book is the statement of Tattwamasi Mahavakya. So now that Mahavakya is this: Saya Esha Anima Aidudatmimidam Sarvam Tas Satyam Sa Atma Tattwamasi Shvetaketu Idi Bhuya Eva Ma Bhagavan Vijñapayatu Idi Tata Swamedi Sakhovacha. This is the statement in the 8th Brahmana, 8th section. The father is instructing Swetaketu. Look here, Swetaketu, the ultimate reality that you are looking for, that one supreme reality, which is the cause of everything, which is the most subtle truth, which is the Atman, the essence of the entire existence, that Tat, that absolute reality, the cause of everything, is Tvam, you yourself. This is the instruction given to Swetaketu, a young man. So, in short, in simple language, we can say, if you tell somebody the God you are praying to, the spiritual truth that you are seeking, It is actually you yourself. Let's say in the language of a monotheistic philosophy, let us say. Now, this will be totally nonsensical for a beginner who listens. Actually, it makes no sense, really speaking. The God you are praying to you yourself, it makes no sense. So Shvetaketu immediately misunderstood. His father is telling that he himself is the reality that he is looking for. But then he thought maybe this cannot be true. So he asked his father for more and more explanation. Bhuya eva ma bhagavan vijñāpayetu. Please teach me, instruct me again. This is a request. So in response to this request, Uddalaka, the father and teacher, he repeats the statement 8 times. That means total 9 statements. And each time when he repeats, he gives a new explanation in the light of a new parable, a new analogy. And finally, Shvetaketu realizes, well, what the father is talking about, not my physical body, not this Shvetaketu, the physical entity. Rather, what the father is talking about is the Atman, the supreme indweller, Antaryami, the reality within, not body-mind complex. And when he understood this, he became silent. This is Chandogya Upanishad 6th chapter. Now Ramanuja has got serious objections to the standard interpretations of Advaitins with regard to these statements. So Ramanuja will tell you, for example, he will tell you here, Tat means the cause of this world. That's what Ramanuja says. According to Shankaracharya, Tat here is the attributeless, impersonal in the sense transcending the dimensions of personality. That means it doesn't mean incapable of having a personal dimension, but going beyond. So this is an important thing to remember. In Vedanta, in Advaita Vedanta, if you hear the word, for example, Nirgunam. Nirgunam, the Nir is upasarga, it is a prefix. In popular literature, Nir can mean devoid of, the absence of, is a negative quality, Nir. But in Vedanta, Nirguna means going beyond or transcending the limitations in terms of gunas. Impersonal doesn't mean having no personal dimension, going beyond the limitations of personality, beyond anthropomorphic interpretations. So, Ramanuja, on the other hand, tells, for example, Samanadhigaranyam hi dvayohu padayohu prakardvayamukhena egartha nishthatvam tasya cha edasmin pakshe mukhyada tathahi tadatvam iti samanadhigaranye tat ityanena jagatkaranam sakala kalyana guna agaram niravadyam brahma uchyate. So I listened to the famous book Vedartha Sangraha of Ramanuja. It's a well-known book because those who don't study, those who cannot get training from a master, especially on Sribhasha, which is an important thesis, they study this book. But it cannot give you a complete full glimpse of Ramanuja's system of philosophy, especially the dialectical things, because Ramanuja's Sribhashya in the earlier part contains many of his objections to Advaita, especially with regard to the concept of avidya, which we just referred to sometime earlier. It is called, Sapta Anubhavati Vada, his objections. But this book's just an introduction. Here Ramanuja says, for example, here Tat Tum Asi, Tat Tum Asi. In Advaita Vedanta, Tat means that transcendental, all-pervading, impersonal, attributeless, indescribable, supreme reality, which cannot be limited, which cannot have any limitations in terms of characteristics or attributes or anything. But here Ramanuja accepts to some extent. Then when he says Sagala Kalyana Gunakaram, it is. So he says, for example, it is an abode. It is a repository of all perfections, all conceivable good qualities. Very similar to the mainstream Christian theology, where God is the totality of all that we can visualize and imagine to be good things, compassionate, capable of everything, strength, compassion, mercy, kindness, wisdom, everything. You can, if you listen to some of the popular preaching sermons, you can find God is defined and conceived to be a repository and a abode of all auspicious qualities, etc. Now, in Advaita system, this is not denied, but Advaita tell you that this is an approach to a higher concept. So I have to invoke again the statement from Vivekananda. We are traveling from Dvaita through Vishishtadvaita towards Advaita. So this is an important thing. Here, of course, those of you who read this Samana Adhikaranyam, actually it is a grammatical rule. See, Adhikarana and Samana, two words you can, Samana Adhikaranyam, means, well, what happens is, suppose two words, let us say, you are talking about a robe, let's say cloth, let us say yellow cloth. Yellow is one thing, or what you may call yellowness, the color is one thing. The cloth is something different. But both are used to denote something, that is a cloth that is yellow in color. So yellow cloth, both have got the same adhikarana, that is the yellow cloth. Yellowness, yellow color, and cloth are different, but both are used to denote the same stuff, so to speak, same thing, that is the cloth that is in yellow color. So both denote the same thing. Similarly, Ramanuja will tell you that Tat, that is that absolute reality, which is the cause of this world, Jagat Karanam. So Ramanuja says, for example, Tathahi Tattvam iti Samanadhirane Tat ityanena Jagat Karanam. Tat iti ityanena Jagat Karanam. By the word Tat, what the Upanishads imply is the ultimate cause of this world. And Tvam iti Chedana Samanadhirana Jivantaryami Rupi Tasariram Tadatmataya Vastidam. Okay. By the word Tvam, what the Upanishad tells you is, it denotes the individual self. What is individual self? Brahman itself is existing as the individual self. Brahman itself is signified as the inner ruler, as the Antaryami, as the inner ruler of Jiva. And that Brahman possessing a body, as existing within the Jiva, as itself, and as possessing Jiva as its present mode. So he says, There's so two things. First, the Antaryamitvam, which is an important doctrine of Ramanuja system. Secondly, Sagala Kalyana Gunagaratvam, that is the characteristic of Brahman as the abode, as the repository, as the source of all that is auspicious in this world. This is not agreeable to Advaita. For Advaita will tell you, even if you call God is very compassionate, you are actually defining God as a phenomenon which is compassionate. So that itself is a limitation. So if you give any definition, anything that is defined, then you are limiting it. It becomes imperfect, it becomes incomplete. Nothing that is defined can be perfect. So it doesn't mean that God is cruel or anything. It's an important thing. That is, of course, this is a very, very important aspect of Advaita Vedanta. You often find criticism that Advaita is immoral. You often find, very, very often, especially during the early years of the trend of Advaita becoming popular, especially those who had only English translations, superficial and inaccurate English translations as the only sources. Frequently there was criticism that Advaita is immoral. It is indifferent with regard to morality. But Advaita is actually a philosophy of the most profound and universal spiritual ethics and morality, because it is teaching the spiritual oneness and unity of not only humanity but the entire creation and existence. So you have to remember this. Advaitins consider even calling God as a compassionate person to be a limitation, because compassionate or non-compassionate, strong or weak, good or bad, all these descriptions are applicable only to empirical things, only to phenomenal things. The second point is, Ramanujais do not accept the distinction between the Paramarthika Satta and Vyavaharika Satta. That's an important thing to remember. Advaita Vedantins will tell you, it's okay to explain God as a compassionate being, but that is only at the Vyavaharika level. But at the Paramarthika level, even to describe God as compassionate or good or auspicious, that itself implies a limitation. It requires a lot of intellectual and theological boldness to assert that even to call God kind and compassionate itself is a limitation. And in Christian theological world, there is only one great theologian, a Dominican priest, Meister Eckhart, who had this boldness to assert that any kind of definition is actually a limitation. This is a very, very important point, remember. Itareshu paksheshu samanadhikaranya hanihi brahmana satoshadacha siyar. And Ramanuja says, if you take the Advaitin's view, there will be a problem, because first of all, if you say that Jiva and Brahman are the same, then there will be the Samanadhyaranya, this particular grammatical structure cannot be applied. This is Ramanuja's system. Is a very, very well-known difference here. So I just wanted to mention some of these ideas, because that may help us to better understand the special characteristics of Ramanuja's system. Okay. Now, but then on the one hand, so we have to make a short summary of Ramanuja's system. With today's class, we are coming to the end of one important part of our discussion on Ramanuja's philosophy. Next, from the next class onwards, we are going to discuss some of the epistemological and some of the ontological distinctions of Ramanuja system in the context of its comparison with Advaita. So far what we described here was essentially, I can put in a few words. First, Ramanuja's wonderful description of the philosophy of devotion. That's a unique contribution of Ramanuja. And also his idea of this self-surrender. Philosophically, he gave a very elaborate description of this philosophy of surrender called Sharanagati. For that he said there are two important qualities required on the part of Jiva, every devotee. One is Akinchanyam, the other is Ananyagaditvam. A devotee of God who aspires to get his grace, he should put up his best effort. He should try to practice karma yoga. He can practice devotion, puja, worship, prayers, music, everything. But then, when he reaches a point that he is not able to progress further, when he is not able to make any further move, then he realizes his own inherent limitation. And when he realizes his limitation, then he decides, well, I am totally helpless, karpanya. One of the 6 characteristics of Saranagati, that is Anugulyasya Sankalpaka, Pradikulyasya Varjanam, Rakshasiri Vishwasa, Goptrutta Varanam, Tata Atma Nikshepa Karpanya, Shadvidha Saranagati. So, when he realizes that his himself is incapable, Akinchanyam, and then he also realizes that there is no other refuge, Ananya Gaditvam, there is no other Gati. Then he gives the whole burden of his spiritual life, he places himself at the feet of the Lord. This happens in 2 different stages, but not always. It can also happen at one stroke. Devotees who have already done a lot of spiritual sadhanas, but have some imperfections in this life, in the early years, they may do certain things which may be very harmful to their spiritual life. So, in fact, Ratnakara was a robber and a thief. The first great writer in Sanskrit literature, Valmiki, the author of Valmiki Ramayana, he was a thief who used to rob saints and sages. And one day a group of saints came, Narada and others came. He tried to rob them. So they asked him, okay, wait a minute. May we ask you, may we put a question to you? For whose sake? Why are you doing this terrible thing, robbing people in the streets? So here I have to live, I have my livelihood. I am a professional thief. And he said, well, so he said he has his wife and children, he has to take care of them. Then you go and ask your wife and children and others whether they will share in your sins. This is a very sinful deed. He accepted that. So are they going to take a share of these sins? He said, I don't know. You go and ask, we'll wait here till you go and return. So this man went home and asked his wife and children and relatives, because he was indulging in this theft and robbery to bring money to take care of his family. They said, we can't share your sins. It is your business. We don't know how you are bringing all these things. You may be robbing, but you should share the sins yourself. We can't share them. And he was actually heartbroken. And he came and he repented and he fell at their feet and they gave him a mantra, they taught him some spiritual disciplines, and eventually he became the great saint Valmiki, the great scholar, the great writer, and also the great devotee. And so, they just gave him one mantra. The shock that he had when his wife and children and parents and relatives told him, we are not going to have a share of your sin. It is your business. You have to go to hell if you want. It's your business. We are not going to hell for your sake. Immediately this man had a sudden transformation. You can see this happening. And then he sat there and started reciting these mantras which they taught him, and eventually became a great saint. This is one kind of prapatya sharanagati, which happens at one stroke without a barking. This you may find in the tradition of Christian mysticism, maybe Saint Francis of Assisi an example. Maybe I think Saint Paul is an example. There are quite a few. Just giving some examples from Christian tradition, Western mystical tradition, so to speak. This is one interesting example. This is the highest, where suddenly you open your eyes and you leave your past far behind once for all. You never look back after that, and a sudden transformation from a sinner to a saint. Then there is another kind of transformation, which has got a krama, an order. You take to spiritual life, start practicing devotional disciplines, prayer, meditation, reciting holy names, reading books, and along with karma yoga. So a bhakta should be a real karma yogin. These 4 levels of karma yoga in the context of a bhakta are outlined in the Bhagavad Gita in the 12th chapter from 8th verse to 11th verse. So you can find in a descending order 4 levels of devotional evolution you can find in the Bhagavad Gita. So anyway, if you are interested, you can ask later. I will explain. No, I'm leaving it there. So you turn to spiritual life. At that time also, you start practicing some kind of a sharanagati, a prapatya or self-surrender. Without that, you cannot really start practicing spiritual life. Even to attend these lectures, one should have an inner realization. Well, I need something more than what I get in management schools or business schools, or looking through, carefully observing the stock exchange fluctuations, After 18 hours you may do in a city in an office, marketing, technology, or share market or investment. And suddenly at one point, this okay, I need something more. So we start practicing something, reading scriptures, doing some prayer and meditation, or associating with people who talk about spiritual or philosophical subjects. That requires some kind of a turning in one direction. That is also some kind of a sharanagati. Not sudden transformation, but you get a shocking realization, well, what you have been doing till now, all suddenly when you look back, everything is dark. Your bank balance is very huge, but spiritual bank balance is a big zero. And then suddenly, and you realize this when we go on working hard, suddenly there is a shocking experience, immediately mind is disturbed. So we look back and we look for something different. That is also some kind of a sharanagati. So this is a very famous, a very distinct contribution of Ramanuja system. He himself wrote in Sharanagati Gadyam and Vaikuntha Gadyam. These are 2 important books for any person who takes to the path of devotion. So that is, one should always have a positive attitude towards spiritual life, and one should be able to get rid of all the negativity, and then one should have a strong faith that God will protect us, and then He is the only protector. And also the feeling that, well, I'm not capable of taking care of my own spiritual destiny, so this complete surrender. Atmaniksheba is the central point. The other 5 are auxiliaries called Angas. Atmaniksheba is Angi. This is an important contribution of Ramanuja's system. So that is one thing. And secondly, the idea that God is endued with all the auspicious qualities called bhagas. So Bhagavan, definition of Bhagavan you find later, in some other books you find. So these are some of the important aspects of Ramanuja with regard to his devotional, spiritual contributions. And from next class onwards, I will discuss something about the subtle, ontological and epistemological aspects of Ramanuja. For example, Ishvara, Jiva, Jagat. Ishvara is Sriman Narayana. Jivas are different individual souls, and also this empirical world. According to Ramanuja's system, Ishvara is present as an indweller in all jivas. That is a central theme. And this external world and jivas are evolutes of Ishvara. Evolutes. Ishvara evolves and become Jiva and Jagat. So Jiva is Chit, Jagat is Achit. And Ishvara is conditioned by this Jiva, individual souls, and Jagat, empirical world. She called Chit, Achit, Vishishta, so Vishishtadvaita. So there are some interesting aspects with regard to this relationship between Jivas and Ishvara. That we will discuss in the coming session. You can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions.
Pranam, Swamiji.
Yeah, namaskar.
I would like to hear about the 4 levels of evolution as explained in chapter 12 of the...
Oh, wonderful. This is precisely what I want, Thank you for this question. So, if you take Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter is Bhakti Yoga. From 8th verse to 11th verse, in 4 verses, you can find Lord Krishna is giving 4 levels of spiritual devotional evolution. So, at the first level, if you always think the Lord is within you, then he will be nivasishisi mayeva the udhamna samsaya. That means, say, if you have fully mayeva manadarsya may buddhim nivesaya, nivasishisi mayeva ada udhamna samsaya. So, you dedicate, you offer your mind, your thought, feelings and emotions, anxieties and worries, all the functions of the mind and emotions, you completely dedicate to the Lord in totality. Then what happens is, then Lord Krishna says, you will live in me and I will live in you. God will live in you and you will be living in God. Mind, thought means my mana and buddhi, emotions and feelings, aspirations and worries, thoughts and everything, you totally dedicate to the Lord. It's a very blessed state of life, but it is the highest state. Actually, this is nothing but Sharanagati and Prapatti, self-surrender. That's what Ramanuja is talking about. So, according to Ramanuja, the 66th verse of 18th chapter is Charama Sloka, which he quotes again and again, Ramanuja in his Gita Bhashya, and also this Vedanta Deshiga in his commentary on Gita Bhashya. Charamasloka. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam saranam praja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suja. So if you dedicate, if you offer everything to me, then you will be living in me. Nivasyashi mayeva. You will be living in me, which by implication also means I will be living in you. But this is the highest state. Now, it is not an easy thing to do. It is properties, not a verbal pronouncement. Oh God, I give it to you. It doesn't happen like that. Frequently we may do. We may do everything is by God's will. I know every day so many millions of people, oh God, thy Lord's be done, thy will be done. But often they will go with their own will most of the time after the prayer is over. Thy will be done, but it doesn't happen that way. If the prayer is done once in their lifetime in total sincerity, it becomes self-surrender. You became a Saint Teresa of Avila. Because you close the bargain, then there is no argument. You go to a market, and when you close the bargain, that's the end of the transaction. Then actually you don't even have to go to church again. If one can sincerely believe, let thy will be done, but it doesn't happen. It becomes a verbal statement. But even the verbal statement also not without its usefulness. So Lord Krishna says how to reach that state. So you come to 9th verse. So adhachittam samadhadam na shaknoshi maistiram abhyasa yogena tato mamichhaptum dhananjaya. That is the 9th verse. Suppose you cannot totally and completely dedicate your will, your mind, your feel, emotions, everything to God, then practice Abhyasa Yoga. Abhyasa means repetition or repeated practice. It's called Abhyasa Yoga. There are many interpretations of this Abhyasa Yoga. One is you practice Navadha Bhakti, stated in the Bhagavata Purana. Sravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Marchanam Bandhanam Dasim Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. That is Navadha Bhakti. That is, you hear, if you want to hear many things, hear about God. And you say many things, you say something about God, Kirtanam. You remember many things, you also remember some scriptural statements about God. And then you do puja, rituals, prayer, confession, whatever it is. And then all these disciplines, you think of God as your mother, your father, your master, and so on. So, Archanam, Bandhanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam. So, you can look upon God as a friend or your master. So, any of these human relations, different aspects of human relationship, can be sublimated into spiritual discipline. That is called Abhyasa Yoga. It will say in modern time, it will say, you think of God as a friend. That's okay, wonderful. Many mystics of the Middle Ages, I'm referring to Christian tradition because I want to somehow make myself intelligible to non-Hindu, non-Indian audience. So many of the mystics, if you read, they look upon God or Christ as a master, often find. So in some traditions. But this was common in India. So some kind of, you establish some kind of a relationship. Just as you have a relationship in your family, that relationship can be sublimated to a spiritual level. That is Abhyasa Yoga. But even this is also not easy for many. So, Abhyasepi asamarthosi matkarma paramo bhava madattham abhikarmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. Suppose you are incapable of practicing Abhyasa Yoga, then all right, you think, you imagine that whatever you are doing is God's work. That's also. Remember, one thing is, if a person sincerely believes that what he is doing, everything that he does is God's work, he cannot consciously do anything evil. It becomes psychologically impossible for him to do anything wrong. Willfully, it becomes impossible for him to do anything wrong if he sincerely believes that whatever he does is God's work. It's God's work. Markarma paramabha, that is 10th verse. Then Lord Krishna comes to the lowest level. Anyone can begin. And then he says, Atha etadabi ashaktosi kartum madhyogamasidha sarva karma phalatyagam tatakuryatatmavan. Even if you cannot practice this, last alternative is given, last resort is, do your work mentally. Mentally you imagine, well, then I have done my best, Lord. Even if a person begins by practicing the last mentioned discipline, slowly he will find he is moving forward, he is evolving to higher and higher level. So these are 4 levels of spiritual disciplines. I mean, from the earliest, the first, I don't call it the lowest, maybe that's the only way to put it. You do your work, even if you cannot go to a place of worship, do everything. Well, I'm giving my action, I am offering my action, also the results to the Lord. Then next, well, it's God's work. That is 10th verse. Then at a still higher level, once you actually start doing everything as God's work, then slowly our mind gets inclined to some spiritual thought currents. And that leads to Abhyasa Yoga, and eventually we will reach the highest state mentioned in the 8th verse. So the 8th verse, it corresponds to the highest. 11th one is the first stage. The other 2 are in between.
Namaste, Swamiji.
Namaste.
So a little bit of confusion that you make clear for me.
Yeah.
So now Brahman cannot be described, right? According to Advaita philosophy.
Yeah.
It's beyond description.
Yeah.
Now in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, as well as we have Vishnu Sahasranam.
Yeah.
It's full of adjectives for God.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah.
God.
Thousands
So
of adjectives. Yeah. Thousands of
Are they
adjectives.
mutually exclusive? Like Advaita doesn't really is different from the rest of mainstream Hinduism,
Yeah,
Bhagavad
yeah.
Gita, Vishnu Sahasranam, or how do they put it in context? How do they put that?
Advaita accommodates all these qualifications, attributes. Shankaracharya himself did the commentary on Vishnu Sahasranama, 1000 names. His commentary is famous, Vishnu Sahasranama. What Advaita tells you is, these names do not exhaust. They do not exhaust the reality. So, even in fact, in that case, the Upanishads tell you that all the Upanishads are only attempt to explain which can only be experienced. Then you may ask this question, then why should you read Vishnu Sahasranama if it doesn't explain God? By repeating, by reading only, we will be able to make our mind ready to eventually realize Advaitic truth. This is an important thing. If the Vedas, if the Upanishads tell you that the Upanishads cannot fully exhaust or describe Brahman, then why should you read the Upanishads? The Upanishads tell you that these Shastras, these books you should read through Swadhyaya, through Adhyayana, and that practice eventually make our mind ready and fit to realize the supreme truth. So Upanishads themselves will take you to a state which is beyond Upanishads. So Advaita fully accommodates and accepts all the attributes. What it says is, The absolute reality is not exhausted, it's beyond attributes. There's an idea behind. This is a very, very important. This is often not fully understood in if you just read translations, frequently this happens. See, the meaning of the word nirguna in the context of Advaita doesn't mean devoid of gunas, it means transcending the realm of gunas. Even, that's why often attributeless. Attributeless is actually a word used, nirvisesha, nirguna, all these words are used. It means beyond, transcending. That's the idea behind. That's a very important thing to remember.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. In fact, these questions will give me a chance. Otherwise, many people will have Brahman has no name, but our God has so many names. Here, Advaita Brahman has no name even. So, surprisingly, you find in Ramanuja system there are astonishing lack of understanding from some of the subtle truths. That's why frequently I say, Ramanuja was listening to his Advaita teacher, that is, I mentioned his name, So Ramanuja's Advaita teacher. And then, but he could have straight away walked a few miles and gone to Kanchi Kamakshi temple. And Shankaracharya went there and he recited this Saundarya Lahari. See, a great devotional piece of classical devotional poetry. Just imagine. So, Madhvacharya, who opposed Shankara, all around him there were temples which were installed by Shankaracharya, where he went and recited, not wrote, he didn't write, he recited this magnificent devotional poetry, like a flow of Ganga. So from that they could have understood this Advaitin teacher is also a great devotee. So it's very important to remember, Yeah.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
I have a question. Did you say that Ramanuja said that Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman are identical? How could that be? And if so, how could Ramanuja realize Nirvikalpa Samadhi if he did not? It sounds like he would be like.
Ramanuja won't talk about Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You find Ramanuja is a prapanna, somebody has surrendered himself. And Saguna Nirguna, Ramanuja's concept of God is not Nirguna. What he said was, he was trying to maybe question the Advaitin's view that Saguna Brahman, it is a realization that happens at the penultimate stage before you realize the supreme reality, Nirguna Brahman. That he was contradicting. His highest is Saguna Brahman itself. So, remember, if you read how Sri Ramakrishna attained Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna was worshipping Divine Mother all his life. And then Totapuri, his teacher, taught him Advaita sadhana, Advaita practice. But he was finding it difficult to transcend that Saguna aspect. Divine Mother was all, because he was a devotee, a worshipper of Divine Mother all his life. Then Totapuri asked him, took a piece of glass and pierced on his between the two eyebrows and asked him to meditate on that. That is a Nirguna Upasana, Nirguna meditation. And immediately Sri Ramakrishna transcended. Remember, transcending is not rejecting. Transcended, going beyond, not rejected. For Sri Ramakrishna continued to be a devotee of the Mother, Divine Mother. But at that Advaitic level, He went beyond the Saguna aspect of the Divine Mother, the form. This is an important thing to remember. So, that again confirms Swamiji's view. See, Ramanuja's system is absolutely 100% correct. But Advaita system it transcends that level. Here transcendence doesn't happen to the reality. Transcendence happens to the seeker, the individual spiritual aspirant who practices. And he, at some point, the highest devotee realizes that the God to whom he is praying is actually residing within him as a divine being. That is a matter of realization. Here again, there is no rejecting of the personal. There is transcending, going beyond of the personal. This is an important thing. If there is a rejection, there will be bitterness. So you can always see, I have when you study the dialectical arguments with Madhva, Ramanuja and Shankara, so of course there is not much of a serious controversy between Shankaracharya system and Ramanuja system. But when it comes to Madhva, you find there is a lot of dogmatism. The dogmatism is the result of the idea that if you are accepting A, then you can accept A only by rejecting B. If you accept A, it doesn't mean that you have to reject B. In spiritual life, it doesn't mean that. And also, in many of the controversies happen because in Christian tradition, for example, Martin Luther, let's say Martin Luther had to reject many things. He could have very easily reformed the church without giving up the great saints. Can't you? See, imagine. See, Shankaracharya's Advaita accommodated all that Prapatti, Sharanagati that Ramanuja taught. Shankaracharya himself wrote magnificent devotional poetry on self-surrender. Bhavanishtakam. Gadistum Tamega Bhavani. Mother, you are the only refuge. He was repeating. So Shankaracharya accepted and accommodated the most magnificent teachings of all the great magnificent teachings of Vishishtadvaita. So Advaita doesn't reject anything. But look at Madhvacharya had to reject everything else. More like Martin Luther. Martin Luther, he had to reform the church. For that he had to give up the saints. And he had to make a great sacrifice. But in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, it doesn't happen like that. This is a very important thing to remember. Like today I was giving the lectures in the symbolism of Divine Mother Kali. It is a very universal spiritual symbolism. When you have this universal symbol at the highest point of realization, then you don't hate anyone just because he is worshipping God differently from us. So anthropomorphism is actually the cause of dogmatism frequently. Martin Luther is a classic example. Yeah.
Did Shankara accept every system like yoga, Sankhya?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The one system that he rejected was Charvaka. That is the old Indian materialism. It's called Charvaka. It's called, it is Lokaitikas. Accepts only, they gave him proper place. He did not fully accept it. Then there is no need for Advaita Vedanta. I mean, there is no total denial of anything. That is the greatness of Advaita.
Hello, Swamiji.
Yeah.
My question is, if you could explain again what Ramanuja described as Tat in Tattwamasi. Thank you.
Yeah. Tattwamasi is a Mahavakya, great statement in the Chandogya Upanishad, 6th chapter. From its 6th chapter. In 6th chapter, there are 16 sections from section 8 to section 16, that are the total 9 sections. There is a discussion of Tattvamasi Mahavakya. Ramanuja tells you that this Tat, that implies the Brahman, the cause of the universe, which he describes as the abode of all auspicious qualities, attributes, and all different aspects, all positive aspects. The Tat Brahman, which is Saguna. Because it is endowed with so many attributes and qualities and so on. So naturally it is Saguna, Sakara. And Tvam is the presence of that Brahman within every individual soul. And both are denoting one reality. The main point of contention between Ramanuja's interpretation and Advaita interpretation is this. Ramanuja says that this Tat, which is called Jagat Karanam, the cause of the universe, the origin of the universe, it is the abode of all auspicious, conceivable auspicious qualities and perfections and great aspects of greatness. Now, in Advaita, even if you define God as the abode of all conceivable qualities, you are limiting that reality, you are defining it. And definition means limitation. So, it is just a matter of discussion, a dialectical discussion. I give the example of Meister Eckhart, who said that absolute reality cannot be described or defined because description itself is a limitation. So also Advaita will tell you, actually this idea is just straight from Shankaracharya's commentary, Eckhartian concept of the Supreme Being, beyond even the Holy Trinity. Even Holy Trinity, that concept itself is a limitation of this infinite, indescribable Supreme Being. That is Eckhart. So you can find, here is only, now remember, this may not be appealing to a devotee, but this is only from metaphysical perspective. At the same time, the same Shankara wrote all the magnificent devotional poetry to help devotees. That is the uniqueness of it. Yeah. Clear to you, I think?
Yeah, I mean it's clear. I think would it be fair to say that? Well, I'm not sure if we covered it maybe in a previous class, like how in Advaita that verse is described.
Oh,
right? Is Tvam in an Advaita sense? Is Tvam like you as an individual, and Tat is more like the Nirguna Brahman, is like the all-encompassing reality? Okay.
Yeah. Actually, we gave a series of classes on Tattvamasi itself while teaching Advaita. A series of classes with quotations from Bhashya, Shankaracharya's commentary.
Okay, I'll go back and listen to those. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hello, Swamiji. It's a short question. Do you think that the misunderstanding of Nirguna, not as transcendence, but as rejection, is where that concept of Vedantas is Buddhist incognito, that statement, that it sort of taps into that? Is that where that came from? The Buddhist incognito business? You know what I mean?
You mean, your question is not very clear to me.
I'm sorry.
Please continue. Please continue.
If you don't don't understand, if you don't accept nirguna as transcendence, but as a rejection, if you interpret that way.
Okay, so you
That's
mean...
how it is that people came to say, have that impression as Vedanta as being Buddhist incognito. I remember you saying that from a different class.
Buddhist, okay.
Buddhist, yes, and it's probably also my misunderstanding of Buddhism too, but is it exactly, Bobby, I can tell knows what I'm talking about.
In the context of comparing Vishishtadvaita and Advaita, I mentioned that Advaita it never rejects the Vishishtadvaita, Ramanuja's concept of God idea. But without rejecting, it just transcends. I don't think I ever spoke about Buddhism in today's class.
Oh, that's...
But Shankaracharya rejects Charvaka system, and in his commentaries, he also, of course, he certainly finds problems with many other philosophical systems. In his attempt to establish Advaita, naturally he finds some problems with many other systems of philosophy, including Buddhism. See, if you're talking about Buddhism, Buddhism believes in Anatmavada. It believes in the inherent fundamental impermanence of anything in this world. That it is in that sense that Buddhism talks about Anatmavada. So there is no such thing as a permanent, eternal reality like Atman, as Vedantins and others tell you. That's what it says. So that is not acceptable to Advaitins, Vishishtadvaitins, or any of these Vedanta philosophers. So Buddhism is not acceptable. But certain aspects of Buddhism certainly can be found in Advaita. For example, if you read Mandukya Karika, I have given almost 132 lectures on Mandukya Karika, so I can find in the audio system. So Mandukya Upanishad actually it deals with Mandukya Upanishad. It's a fairly big commentary on Mandukya Upanishad. Mandukya Karika is a commentary on Mandukya Upanishad. Gaudapada Karika, another name. So Shankaracharya wrote an important commentary on that, and there he contradicts many of the dialectical arguments of the early Buddhist scholars. At the same time, some aspects of Buddhism he also accepted, that you find. So even the language is very often similar. That's all. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.